Why did Stryker sew up Wade's mouth in such an ugly way? What did he do to his eyes? How could Deadpool, with his head cut off, control his body? And why is his regeneration so unstable that he had to cover one eye with a bandage? In the end, the answer to these and other curious questions concerning our old acquaintance Weapon 11, also known as Deadpool, is in this video. Don't forget to leave a like and enjoy watching. He is also called Wade Wilson. He also loves his katanas, and he is also excessively talkative, which annoys everyone around him. Yes, all of this is Deadpool, but in his first movie adaptation of 2009 as the antagonist of our other old acquaintance Logan, the film X-Men Origins. Wolverine was stingy even with the anatomical details of the main character's transformation, unlike X-Men and X-Men 2, which came out years earlier. It also became notable for rough mistakes in the adamantium injection scene. We will definitely talk about all this in the next videos about Wolverine. Nevertheless, we do know some details about the hero Deadpool. In this adaptation, Wade is a mutant from birth, whose abilities are comparable to another mutant, Zero. Essentially, their mutations are primarily inhuman reflexes and coordination, as well as agility and of course strength. Performing jumps with such effectiveness would be difficult without very strong leg muscles. Wade's body and skills serve Stryker as the foundation for his future creation, Weapon 11, whose serial number directly follows Logan's. The task of this super soldier, who obeys commands without question, is to kill other mutants. Stryker for many years studied mutant abilities that could coexist within one body without destroying it, and the set of such abilities turned out to be quite limited. Moreover, after copying the mutation from Scott Summers, better known by the nickname Cyclops, he armed the 11th with destructive beams from his eyes. At the same time, the protection of the 11th's head from the enormous temperature generated at that moment by the visual system was weak. You can notice how hot the adamantium becomes in the area of the eyeballs. That is, Stryker transferred Scott's destructive abilities to Pool fully, but not the adaptive ones. Thus, the 11th Deadpool absorbed the powers of 6 mutants: Wade Wilson, Wolverine, Victor Creed, Bradley with telekinesis, teleporter John Wraith, Scott Summers, and Jason Stryker. The last one is Stryker's son. According to him, it was his son who became the first link in the creation of the future perfect soldier. The brain of the mutant test subject under number 143 secreted a fluid that allows controlling other mutants. It was precisely this fluid that made Wade Wilson controllable, because on the eve of the transformation, Wade had not been killed. A dead body would have been of no use to Stryker. With a washed brain and a sewn up mouth, all this time he was alive. And the final puzzle piece in creating Pool was Logan's mutation. After the successful implantation of adamantium into his body, Stryker made sure of the success of combining his DNA with the alien metal. After all, Logan's regeneration not only helped him survive the procedure, but importantly, it did not reject adamantium as a foreign element. This healing ability helped Wade survive both a similar procedure with adamantium and all subsequent modifications. It is worth separately noting the mutation of Chris Bradley. He is not only capable of controlling electronics, accumulating and generating electricity, but also of being a kind of radio receiver, catching radio signals. A similar method of communication in the form of transmitting remote commands was applied by Stryker to the 11th as well. It is also likely that Bradley's ability allowed Pool to survive even with his head cut off in the scene shown to us after the credits. Stryker emphasized twice that in order to kill Wolverine, it is necessary to separate his head. He did this, among other ways, through giving orders to Deadpool. But in the case of Pool himself, it didn't work, because Logan's abilities, combined with Bradley's abilities, allow control of electrical signals in nerve cells from a distance. The power of Scott Summers, it seems, was planned to be applied to the 11th, but at the same time, Stryker had no time to study it, nor to address the question of its adaptation in his body, because the combinations of the other donor's abilities he had selected for years, while Scott fell into his hands literally on the eve of Pool's activation. In addition, the very modification of the 11th's eyes looks unplanned. It is also worth noting that, in the case of the young Cyclops, they did not limit themselves to a simple collection of saliva for obtaining genetic materials. While being on Stryker's island, there are traces of blood on his eye bandage. That is, the donor tissue collection was carried out directly from his eyes, which could have been extremely unpleasant. Wade's eyes, for subsequent modifications, apparently were completely removed, after which they were were placed in metallic sockets made of an unknown material, apparently to protect the skull from the same extremely high temperatures. These things in this scene are even screwed in with bolts. But the most interesting thing here is that already in Wade's adamantium skull, holes were drilled and surgical instruments were used to access the optic nerves and eye muscles. That is, the presence of adamantium at this stage made the eye modification procedure difficult, which once again indicates its spontaneity. As in earlier movie adaptations, and in this one as well, in the scenes of Logan's operation, there are drawn lines visible on his body. These are the contours for the instrument that injects adamantium into his body. The small round contours are exactly the points of needle insertion. In Wolverine's case, this does not apply to all such points, and I attribute that to mistakes, since in some shots, the needles were simply forgotten to be added, while in Stryker's computer visualization they are present. But in Deadpool's case, judging by the remaining marks, adamantium was pumped in precisely through these points. Overall, these contours on Deadpool's body are greatly enlarged compared to Logan's. Logan had only 2 points of adamantium injection across his entire chest, while Poole had 8 just on the front, not counting the back. And it seems this should tell us that Poole's skeleton is more advanced, but it's more likely about something else, namely the lower level of automation of the procedure compared to Logan's. After Logan's escape, the general reproaches Stryker for spending $500 million on upgrading the test subject's skeleton, and the military budget isn't infinite. In addition, he doesn't share Stryker's burning enthusiasm for creating adamantium minions. So the increase in the share of manual work in the case of the 11th is a forced measure to save Stryker's own production costs. You might object and say that automation reduces the product's cost price, to which I answer, only in the case of mass, not single unit production. So the device with a small capacity in Stryker's laboratory on the island is an improvised setup for injecting adamantium by hand, which works in conjunction with the device shown in this frame, providing pre-prepared access to individual elements of the test subject's skeleton. It's hardly likely that this thing is used here to fix fractures. Because of all this, the process of introducing metal into the 11th turned out to be longer, more localized, and most importantly, more gradual. And this procedure strongly resembles what we saw in Logan's memory scenes from the earlier films. The operation process was shifted more toward manual work by engineers and scientists. And regarding the most memorable attributes of this Deadpool's appearance, as Stryker said, if you didn't have a mouth, Wade, you would be the perfect soldier. First of all, Stryker did silence Wade, and did it in a rather crude, sadistic way. His mouth opening is a scar fused together in the most unaesthetic way. Moreover, initially, at the earlier stages of Poole's creation, the mouth was simply sewn shut. And all this despite the fact that Stryker could have made Wade silent easily by applying separate command executions. This may be related to the off-screen story of Wade's metamorphosis, which did not make it into the film. Wade was still alive, therefore, remaining conscious at certain stages of transformation. He could continue to annoy Stryker with his obsessive chatter, the same thing he did in the X-Men adaptation of 2016. After all, even with a sewn mouth and a washed brain, Deadpool still shows sneering emotions. Because of that, the enraged Stryker could have reached the breaking point and cut out Wade's mouth along with extensive tissues of the lower jaw. His lower jaw, as can be seen, is all covered with scars. This led to such an unaesthetic tissue fusion. However, not for long. In general, it is worth paying attention to Wade's head healing. With the acquired abilities of Logan, it heals clearly not as effectively as the rest of the body. After Poole's activation, the previously cut skin around the eyes did not heal properly, leaving exposed parts of the adamantium skeleton in different shots. It looks different, but it seems that it is indeed exposed adamantium, and the left eye even had to be patched with a bandage. There can be 2 reasons for this. The first was spoken by Stryker's senior medic. At the time of activation, Poole's fusion had not yet been completed. By that, she meant that the superpower of the 11th was not yet ready for full use. Several hours of work were missing, and Stryker activated Poole in an emergency. For the same reason, the numerous marks from the needles on his body might not have healed. The second reason is that Poole's head is the main Frankenstein monster within his body. In addition to adamantium, not only other artificial elements, but also foreign tissues were implanted into it. including in order to prevent the savage regeneration from rejecting these elements, the regeneration of the head had to be fixed and reduced. In this sense, the head of the 11th is the most vulnerable in terms of attacks. And of course, the biggest anatomical illogic regarding this Deadpool's body is the extremely long adamantium blades that were implanted by Stryker at earlier stages of the transformation as a modification of his favorite katanas. In principle, these blades can quite well fit and be stored inside his arms, but in that case, he would no longer be able to bend his arm at the elbow. Nevertheless, he did so in the frame. After his activation, in the episode where Stryker slit the general's throat, we were shown that this implanted weapon represents a solid, long adamantium blade. At the base, it has an altered shape, which is supposed to serve as a fixing mechanism in Wade's hand or wrist, in combination with other adamantium elements implanted into the arm. Roughly the same way we saw in Logan's X-Ray in the first X-Men film. But one way or another, the story of the 11th is not the story of a super weapon. It is a story about how the joke about katanas at his ex-girlfriend's wedding was most likely true. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and comment. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. See ya in the next videos.